so much, everybody here in Lafayette, and thank you all for showing up. This is what democracy looks like. This many people showing up on a cold, rainy night in October is pretty impressive, and I am very grateful to all of you. Democracy is what I'm all about, what my campaign is all about. This is the first time there was a primary in at least 14 years in this district, and now the first time there's been an actual contest in a general election in 8 years. So I ran because I felt that people needed a voice and a vote and a chance to have a choice. And so the primary was exciting, and I'm grateful to all of you who helped out with working for my campaign or for Dave Valesky's campaign and made it a really energizing event for our democracy here locally. And to the people who voted for me and really sent the message that we want to have a voice, we want to have change. So I am running in the 53rd Senate District, which includes most of Syracuse, 6 towns around Syracuse in Onondaga County, and then all of Madison County and a little bit of Oneida County. So it's a big district that includes urban, suburban, and rural areas, which makes it pretty unusual in certainly in the Democratic conference in the state, but also in the state in general. So it's a pretty exciting place to be running. I'm learning a ton about the issues in all of those regions and specific issues that people have in Syracuse or in central New York. So it's been a very exciting time for me. A little bit about me. I am a transplant here. I came here about 20 years ago. I was living in Minnesota, and I was a college professor out there teaching Russian. My husband teaches at Lemoyne College, and we were commuting between St. Paul and Syracuse for about 9 years, and then we had a child and realized we couldn't keep doing that. So I moved here, and I retrained at SUNY ESF in environmental science, and I've been working at SU ever since in sustainability, which means looking at big picture questions, how humans and the natural world interact, and looking at them from a systems perspective, so that when you try to make them work more efficiently, you aren't solving a problem over here and causing a worse problem over there. You are looking at them as a whole system. So I want to bring those skills of understanding complete systems and problem solving to Albany. I think they're sorely underrepresented in our government. And failing that, I tell people I'm also fluent in Russian, which could become very important. But let's hope not. So, as I said, I'm running about our democracy. The number one issue that I've been running on that certainly emerged in the course of the primary while I knocked on about 5,000 doors and talked to people who said what you were saying, that not only was their state senator not showing up, but also that our election system is broken, our campaign finance system is broken. We have some of the lowest voter turnout rates in the whole country in this state because we've done voter suppression extremely well here. It's why it's hard to register to vote. We have 2 primaries, which no other state has. We have, I mean, for Congress and for the state and local, we had a primary on a Thursday when you could only vote from noon till 9. It's just ridiculous how hard it is we make it to vote, and compared to almost any other state in the country, ours are the worst voting laws. So changing that is something we can do. The reason we have those bad voting laws is a historical reason that the Republicans have maintained control of the state Senate for most of the last 70 years, and they've done it by gerrymandering these districts. And if you've ever looked at a map of these districts, somebody described my district and the district that John DeFrancisco has represented as looking like 2 lobsters fighting with each other. It's a mess, and it gets worse elsewhere in the state. But they also did it with voter suppression, so making sure that it was hard for people to vote. And then in the last 7 years they did it by co-opting a few Democratic senators to help them maintain their majority. So we're about to have a Democratic majority in the state Senate, and it's going to be very exciting because we can transform our election laws. We can change our school funding system so that our schools, I mean, many of our districts of schools are woefully underfunded from what the courts have said that they should have. And we can change our health care laws so that every single New Yorker is covered, and I believe truly if we do it right we can do that in a way that saves us money statewide on health insurance. And if you saw the news last week about climate change, we can also really get to work on the issue of climate change, of green energy, and reducing our state's carbon footprint so that we are part of the solution for little children who are going to grow up in a very difficult world if we don't change what we're doing now. So those are some of the issues that I'm running on. I wanted to just talk about one issue that has come up in this campaign that I hear as a talking point in a lot of places about people being afraid that if we end up with Democratic control of the state Senate, that will somehow be bad for upstate. This is a message that's out there. And I want to put it to rest because, A, Republicans have had control, as I said, for pretty much the last 70 years, and it has not been great for upstate. The trends have not been good for upstate in that period of time. But B, because we're very close to certain that there's going to be a Democratic majority in the Senate, having members of the Democratic majority representing this district and the one next door that was John DeFrancisco's district would make this a very powerful region of the state. And it would do that for a couple of reasons. One, just if you're in the majority, you can bring a lot of member items to the district and just have influence. But the second reason is even more important. I was down meeting with the members of the Democratic Conference last week, and the 7 of us who won primaries. And what I learned was that this is the only district that has a whole rural county in it and a lot of rural areas in it. The other 2 upstate Democratic districts are in Albany and Buffalo, and they're very urban districts. And what the leadership of the Democrats are saying to me was, if we're going to grow as a conference, we're going to grow upstate. And we need to look to districts like yours to learn how to do it, to learn how to convince people that democratic values are upstate values. Democratic values involve addressing poverty, addressing infrastructure issues, addressing school funding, addressing healthcare. A lot of the issues that we care about are upstate issues. And we need to get that message across. And so they're going to be looking to me, and I hope John Mannion in the next district over, as kind of bellwethers for how to do this right. So I believe this district is actually going to be more powerful than it's ever been in the state Senate. And I encourage you, when people bring up that issue, oh, it would be terrible for upstate to have Democratic control of the Senate, tell them it does not have to be that way. We can really make this something very exciting for this district. I'll stop there, and did you want any questions right away?
I see in upstate is the high real estate taxes, and that tends to be driven, I think, by a lot of the funding for the Medicare, Medicaid type of funding. And you hear a lot about, we got to attract our kids or keep our kids here and everything. And my thought is if you're losing kids, and I have a kid in Chicago and one in Los Angeles, if you lose them, what's to keep the parents here? So I mean, it becomes sort of a downward spiral. So on sort of a real property tax issue, what do you think?
That's a great question. Was everyone able to hear it?
No.
No? Okay, the question was about property taxes being a real drain on upstate and driving people out of the state, driving young people out, and then the older people may follow them, or their parents may follow them. So what do we do about that? I live in Syracuse. Syracuse has become famous as the city with the worst concentrated poverty and racial segregation of any city in the country. And Buffalo and Rochester are not far behind. And I have been poring over our state budget and trying to figure out what's going on here. And one of the things I noticed is that New York State pushes more of its expenses off onto property taxes and local taxes, that would be sales taxes and property taxes, than almost any other state. And that is particularly harsh on upstate New York because our property values are low. So we have to put very high taxes on them in order to raise any revenue at all, compared to downstate where the property values are much higher. So I want to advocate for reducing the proportion of our state revenue that comes from property taxes, and also seeing if there's a way to take the Medicaid cost in particular away from upstate counties. So Onondaga County pays $100 million a year in Medicaid costs, and that's 2/3 of your county property taxes go to paying those Medicaid costs. If the Medicaid costs could be taken over by the state for upstate counties, that would be a big deal. The best way to do that, I believe, is through the New York Health Act, which would provide health care for all, and it would pool our healthcare dollars in one pool and be far more efficient and allow us to renegotiate drug prices and do a lot of things to allow us to have savings. I won't go into all the details, but that would be one way to just pull that $100 million out of our Medicare, out of our county property tax. But in any case, I believe very firmly, so the other thing that you notice when you read about the state budget is that the very wealthy have done extremely well in the last 10 years since the Great Recession, but really in the last 40 years. And they've gone, I don't remember the exact numbers, but gone from having something like 10 or 12% of all the wealth to having more like 40%, 35 to 40% of all the wealth. So they're doing extremely well, and part of it is because our income tax brackets have shifted much more, putting much more burden on the less wealthy and far less on the very wealthy. And I think if we shift away from property taxes, which hurt people on fixed incomes a lot, and sales taxes, which hurt people on very low incomes, and we shift to a more progressive income tax, that would make a big difference. And at least I know in Syracuse, using the property tax to fund your schools doesn't work in districts with low property values. So we've got to figure this out, and I think we have an opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you.
It was a very long answer.
All right, very good.
All right.